Well, friends, welcome. This is always a very exciting time for us here at Christian Theological Seminary with the Lilly Endowment Clergy Renewal programs. And it's exciting in particular, not only as a chance for us to be able to talk a little bit about the clergy renewal programs, but also to really express our deep gratitude, not only for the chance to administer these programs on behalf of Lilly Endowment, but in an even deeper sense, gratitude for the work of ministry itself. I don't think I have to tell anyone who is on this call that under the most normal circumstances, ministry is a challenge, is a heavy lift. And I also don't have to tell you that these last few years, decades, foreseeable amount of time have been anything but normal. The challenges facing the world have been significant, yet at the same time, we are so gratified to see the ways that God continues to move through the churches, through the work of congregations, through the work of pastors. And it is our deep honor to be able to help support that and strengthen that through these programs. I'll begin in just a bit by telling you a little bit about the programs, but first I would like to offer a word of prayer. Gracious God, we look around the world in these changing seasons and we see so much beauty, so much abundance, so many ways in which your Spirit continues to shape us and move in the world that you love. We also see pain. We see brokenness. We see injustice. We see the ways in which the work of ministry is needed more than ever. So in that spirit, we ask that you give courage. We ask that you give a deeper faith that you are still at work in this world that you love. And most of all, the spirit of gratitude that every effort of ours, no matter how big or small, is joined to the work of your spirits. Let that spirit be with us this afternoon and guide us always. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, friends, the purpose of this webinar, will be together for about an hour and a half, is to let you know about the Lilly Endowment Clergy Renewal programs. We'll give some basic information, and then we'll also have a chance to answer any questions that you have. Before we get started formally, just a couple of logistical matters. You see at the bottom of your Zoom screen a Q&A button. That is the place where, at any point as we're talking, if you have questions, just go ahead and put them down and we'll get to as many of them as we can during our time together. This webinar is also being recorded, so you don't need to, you're welcome to take notes, but you don't have to scurry and get every single thing down, because you'll be able to go back and watch the recording on our website at your leisure. And there are also plans to overdub this recording in Spanish very soon, if you'd like to share this content with any Spanish-speaking friends in your network. My name is Rob Saylor. I've had the pleasure of directing these programs now for close to 11 years here at Christian Theological Seminary. I'm aided by Karen, and in the time I've worked with Karen, I've learned two things about her. One is that she's awesome. She's very responsive. She'll be the front line for so many of you as you contact the programs. And the second thing I've learned about Karen is that how you pronounce her last name depends on how Sicilian you want to sound. So Karen, give us the rundown very quickly of the Sicilian way and the other ways to say your last name.
Yeah, so there are a lot of ways you can say it. We usually say Bazzone because it's the easiest for most people, but we will tell people, unless you're Italian, and then you would say Bozzone. Either way, I'll answer to it. But if you say Bozzone, I know you're a friend.
And as I said, Karen works with so many logistics of the program, and for many things, when you contact the programs, if you're not talking to me, you'll be talking with her. And we're also very gratified to be joined by the Reverend Brian Williams, who is a program officer at Lilly Endowments, which for over 20 years now has been offering these clergy renewal programs. And I'd like to turn it over to Brian just to bring a word from the endowment, if you'd like.
Great, thanks, Rob. And I appreciate all of you all being here today, and my sincere word of gratitude to Christian Theological Seminary for the ways in which you shepherd this program. While Lilly Endowment has had this clergy renewal program going for over 2 decades, I am not that old. I've only been at Lilly Endowment for a little over 6 years now. But it's been my pleasure and my privilege and an honor to be associated with this. You know, when the endowment started this program back in the late 90s, it really came about because the leadership, they really wanted to figure out what is a way in which we can help our clergy experience something that will help sustain them and help them flourish in ministry. And after many conversations, research, and things of that nature, we discovered a couple of things. One, a pastor's job, while very meaningful, is often the most exhausting thing that pastors experience. I mean, a pastor's life, as you all know, is just constantly moving from one thing to the next. And now in this pandemic period that we've experienced, it has just pushed all of those things into hyperdrive, overdrive, you name it. But the other thing that we have really come to understand is there are ways in which pastors can be renewed, feel revived, feel re-energized, if you will, for their ministry. And some of that is what we're here to discuss today. But let me, before we do that, just let me share a couple of things with you. It's interesting. We've been learning from professional therapists that work with clergy. And here are a couple of observations that they've made. One is pastors are feeling a sense of despair. Part of that reason has to do with just the overdrive, the being overworked, to just laboring beyond what is even expected of anybody. And by labor, I mean both mental and emotional as well as physical. And actually, the mental and emotional works even more. But another thing they have said is that pastors are at this really critical time that they see right now. There becomes a point where pastors can work to leaning toward a definition of burnout, which is more of a clinical definition of being stressed beyond stress. And they say that things are at a really critical point now to do some intervention, if at all possible. And part of the way of doing that intervention is providing them time to step away and to rest. And so it's been interesting to see how some denominations and their judicatories actually build that in to their practice, and how some will make it available only after the point in which it's too late. So for that reason, I'm grateful for all of you all who are listening on today, because the last thing I will say, and I promise this is it, that we found is renewal has a positive and transformative effect on the pastor because it strengthens their sense of vocation and call, as well as their relationships and their families and their congregation. Another thing is that the majority of congregations, they will engage in new activities as a result of the pastor's leave, which is often very gratifying to hear, because the pastor being away gives the congregation an opportunity to discover its own leadership gifts in ways that it may not have done before. And then the last thing is many congregations that in the past have not received renewal grants, we've gotten letters and testimonials and things that have come back to us to say, even though we didn't get a grant, we structured some kind of renewal leave for our pastor that has been life-changing. And so we are just grateful that folks are interested in this program and are willing to take the next step to participate in it. So hear from Lilly Endowment and my colleagues there that we are grateful for you all for being a part of this webinar today. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Brian. And as I said, the Christian Theological Seminary has been honored to administer these programs now for almost half of their life, 10 years out of the 20 or so years that the programs have been in existence. And what's really exciting about that is, you know, this is a very experimental time in the church. Many people are trying out new things and so on. It's nice to be a part of something. And I say this in all humility because, like Brian, I was not around at the time that the program started. It's nice to be a part of something that has proven to be effective in 2+ decades. The testimonies that have come in as far as the effectiveness of these renewal leaves for, as Brian said, not only renewing the pastor, but renewing the shared ministry relationship between the pastor and the congregation. We have ample evidence that it works, and that's why we want to continue offering this opportunity year after year. So I always want to begin just with the simple answering a simple question: what are the clergy renewal programs? In short, what the clergy renewal programs do is that we give grants to congregations of up to $50,000 to support the pastor taking a leave period away from the congregation in order to renew, revitalize, and to reconnect with those aspects that lead to vital, strong, engaged ministry. Up to $15,000 of that $50,000 can be used by the congregation to cover costs while the pastor is away, or to do parallel programming, things that the congregation will find renewing. And that really is about as far as we go in terms of talking about the content of what a leave needs to be. You tell us what it is that you as a pastor would do during that time, that you as a congregation member would like to see happening with the congregation during that time. And the possibilities are very wide. Many pastors choose to travel to one or more destinations during the leave. Oftentimes, pastors will identify activities that make them feel alive and energized, not just as ministry professionals, but as human beings, you know, hobbies, as it were. It also is a very powerful time to strengthen family connections and connections with those whose relationships are crucial for you in terms of sustaining you, again, not only in ministry, but just in your life. So a spouse, a partner, children, friends from seminary, close friends, whatever relationships you have in your life that would benefit from sustained attention, those also are eligible to be a part of this opportunity. Generally speaking, the form of these leaves are multi-month. Oftentimes people describe it as a sabbatical of sorts. The sabbatical is a word that on the one hand we like because it has deep biblical roots, you know, Sabbath and so on. The reason we like to say renewal leave, though, instead of sabbatical, is that especially those of you that are in more academic environments, you may be used to sabbatical being very product oriented. Oh, I'm taking a sabbatical in order to write this book or learn this skill. Or with a renewal leave, you're welcome to produce products if that would be life-giving for you. However, the main product of a renewal leave, as we see it, is a renewed and revitalized pastor and a refreshed congregation. And so we don't want to give the impression that pastors need to come back from their leaves, you know, having holding something in their hands that they have spent a lot of time and effort crafting during the time. Again, if you're the sort for which that kind of thing would be renewing for you, great, but it is not required. On our website, we have a number of testimonials from pastors and congregations that have done this. So if you'd like to see examples of what people have done, there are plenty of them up there. I remember one pastor, for instance, who was a lifelong C.S. Lewis fan. So with his renewal leave, he took his family to England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, all of these C.S. Lewis sites in the UK. And yes, he did try to step into the wardrobe to see if somehow he could disappear into Narnia. Based on the fact that he came back and wrote his reports, I'm assuming it didn't work, but he's over there doing C.S. Lewis things. And then what I love about it is that the congregation used its funding not only to pay for a supply pastor while he was away, but also to purchase, I believe it was the screw tape letters, a copy of the screw tape letters for everyone in the congregation. So the congregation is having a C.S. Lewis immersion. The pastor and his family are having a C.S. Lewis immersion. And when they come back together, they have so many sermon illustrations, so many teaching opportunities based on this shared language. Another one that I remember is a pastor whose congregation was, like many congregations, in a neighborhood where the demographics were changing fairly rapidly. And the congregation was really asking the question, how do we practice deep, radical hospitality to the neighbors whom we know and the neighbors whom we have yet to know? And the pastor intentionally chose travel activities that would place herself in slightly unfamiliar territory. That is territory in which she would really need to experience the hospitality and guidance of others, so that she could have an almost existential, emotional experience of what it means to be a stranger and to need to be hosted. And I remember the congregation, with its funding, brought in several Bible scholars to talk about the hospitality as a biblical value, both in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. And so again, when the congregation and the pastor came back together, they were able to share their experiences, and they had not only new ideas, but I think a new drive, a new vision for what deep, radical hospitality might look like in their setting. Those are just two examples of hundreds that I could name, but the way I would invite you all to think about this, and I'll speak to the pastors first, would be, if at some point in the future you were to walk into your office on a given Tuesday morning and you just felt fired up, energized, excited about ministry, rested, what would you personally have been doing in the time prior to that, with some allotted time away and with resources to be able to support that, monetary resources? What would you personally do that would bring you to that state? The tagline of our program is, what will make your heart sing? And I'll be honest that when I became director about 10 years ago, I heard that question and I thought, is that, I'm not used to hearing that kind of language often in church circles. I'm used to hearing what program will work, or what's what will be the most effective way to do X. What will make your heart sing seems kind of abstract to me. I have since come to deeply love that question. And the reason is because I have seen that question be the occasion for deep introspection on the part of pastors. Who am I? What makes me feel alive? When do I feel closest to God? And it is also the occasion for very vulnerable but beautiful conversations between the pastor and the congregation, in which the congregation asks itself, who are we? What makes us come alive? And also, how do we love and support our pastors in this way during this time? So all of this is to say that when we ask you to tell us, what would you do during this time and with this funding that will be effective in bringing about revitalization and refreshment for you as a pastor, and then for the congregation as a whole, know that that is a sincere invitation for you to dream alongside your congregation. Until very recently, some of you may know that in our materials, we strongly urged that this time away be an uninterrupted period of no less than 3 months, 3 total months. We still believe that there is a particular effectiveness to having an extended, uninterrupted time away. So if that is feasible within your life, within the congregation's life, we urge you to stretch towards that kind of goal. However, we're also aware that for a variety of reasons, 3 months uninterrupted time away from a congregation may just not be feasible. And in that case, starting several years ago, and if you've been following the programs for a while, you'll note that this is a change that happened a couple of years ago. Starting a few years ago, we said that pastors and congregations can propose a series of shorter leaves. Hopefully that still adds up to a significant amount of time away, but that can be taken over a 24-month period. So in other words, when we talk about a renewal leave, you can think of that as one uninterrupted chunk of time away, 3 months, 4 months, or so on. Or if you want to take a slightly longer horizon and think of a series of shorter leaves, a month, 3 weeks at a time, or so on, taken across a 24-month period, then we also invite proposals that structure the leaves that way. And all of this is spelled out in the RFP document, the request for proposals document, that is available on our website at lilyclergyrenewal.org. And I'll say multiple times throughout our time together this afternoon, if you have questions about any of those logistics, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. I've already mentioned that the grants are for up to $50,000, and up to $15,000 of that can be used by the congregation, both to cover costs incurred by the leave, and also to do other kinds of activities like some of the ones that I've named. The only things that we caution congregations not to think towards with this money would be any sort of long-term capital improvements to the congregation. In other words, this is not an opportunity to fix that leak in the roof. This is not an opportunity to upgrade that sound system. We really do want this money to be focused on the experience of the leave itself. You'll also want to think carefully, if as a congregation, if you do bring in guest facilitators, guest speakers, or so on, there are a number of excellent topics that those folks can address, but you want to make sure that they're not addressing topics that are best discussed while the pastor is present. So anything around staffing, anything around finances, anything that would be enough of a serious and potentially hot button issue that it would not be healthy for the pastor and the congregation long term if the congregation is digging deeply into those subjects while the pastor is away. Save that for a time in which the pastor and the congregation can have those conversations together. But again, that leaves a whole host of other excellent topics that congregations can be engaging during that time: theology, spirituality, history, prayer, art, so much else. You'll notice that I'm saying congregations a lot. One of the pieces of this program that I would identify really as its heart and soul is that this is not simply something that a pastor applies for as an individual. In these programs, the congregation is the applicant, and should the grant be awarded, the congregation is the recipient. And that is for a whole host of reasons, but the primary reason is because, again, we see these opportunities as something for the pastor and the congregation to engage together to strengthen their shared ministry for the future. And so one of the main pieces that our readers will look for as they are adjudicating these applications. And because it's a competitive program, we do receive many more excellent applications than we're able to fund. One of the main things that readers look for is there strong evidence that the congregation and the pastor have been on this journey together, that they have dreamed this together, and that there is strong congregational support for this opportunity. Now, we know that might take a significant amount of time, especially if this is not the kind of thing that a congregation has done or even considered before. So please know that any time that you spend in really thinking through this, and if there are concerns within the congregation, which are very understandable, that there would be concerns, take the time to address those fully and thoroughly. And if that means maybe applying in a future year rather than the current year, again, in our experience, that time spent really acclimating the congregation and letting concerns be heard and talked through, that is time well spent. As far as the timing of the programs, in just a minute, I will turn it over to Karen to talk about the logistics of applying. I will note at this point, though, that this is something that you'll need to think ahead about. The applications for the program are due in the spring. This year it is March 15th. Those applications will be for leaves that are taken anytime in the following calendar year, so 2024. That means that you'll want to think ahead. If you know that you are envisioning a leave for 2024, this spring is the time to apply. If you wait until 2024, the year 2024 to apply, then you're applying for a leave that will be taken in 2025. So we'll talk a little bit about budgeting logistics and so on. But at this point, you may be thinking to yourself, well, how do I apply? Let me say too, I forgot to mention this earlier. You hear me using the plural word programs. There are actually two programs that make up the Clergy Renewal opportunity. One is a program specifically for Indiana congregations. The other is a program for congregations in the other 49 states. So if you are a congregation in Indiana, you'll apply with the Indiana application. If you're a congregation in the other 49 states or the territory of Puerto Rico, you'll apply using the national application. The programs are very much the same, but you'll just want to make sure that you're using the right application. So with that in mind, Karen, I'd invite you to just talk a little bit with folks about how they actually apply.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I have just a few things to share with everyone. Just some details about applying, and let me share this with you. All right. So these are some important things to know. This is not exhaustive per se, because as Rob mentioned, we have that request for proposals document, and so much information is contained in there. I just wanted to hit the highlights for everybody so that you would know just that top level key information. As Rob mentioned, the applications are due by Wednesday, March 15th of 2023. This means that if you're sending a hard copy, it needs to be postmarked by March 15th. And if you are emailing, your email needs to be timestamped by 11:59 p.m. on the 15th, Eastern time, that is. So be aware that a lot of folks aren't aware that here in Indianapolis, we are in the Eastern time zone. So keep that in mind. If you are in a different time zone, just make sure that when you're submitting that you're just aware of the time differences. Something that's helpful for you guys to know, especially if you've applied before, or maybe it's been a few years, we don't offer an online application option any longer. We used to have a portal that was available, but that changed with last year's program. And so we now offer two ways for you to submit your proposal to us. You can print it and mail us a hard copy, or you can create a single PDF and email that to us. This year, we have a dedicated email address for those emailed applications. You'll find that in the request for proposals document, and it's just clergyproposals@cts.edu. And that email address is strictly for emailing your proposal to us. We do ask, this is important, that you select only one of these two options, either a mailed hard copy or an emailed electronic copy. And kind of confuse the process, and we would hate for anybody's proposals to fall through any cracks. And with that, what we've done is we've designed a very clear and specific process for you that lets you know that your proposal has been received and processed and uploaded into our database. We realize that congregations and pastors that work together to craft these proposals invest a lot of time and energy, as Rob mentioned earlier. We know that this question, what will make your heart sing, really does take some deep thought and some soul searching, so to speak. And so we know you've put a lot into it. And so we put in place a robust process that allows you to know at what stage your application is as far as being processed. And so we do ask that please choose one of these options. And then when you look through the RFP, you will see that we ask you not to contact us before 3 weeks is up, but at that 3-week point after the application deadline, if you have not received any of the confirmation emails, especially if you haven't received the system generated one, make sure that you reach out to us once that 3 weeks has passed. It's at that stage that we can make sure we locate your proposal. If it didn't get processed at some point, there's some piece in the process that we've missed, or it could be that you might have missed a confirmation email in your spam or your junk or whatever that case might be. But please make sure that you're getting back to us after that 3 weeks if you haven't seen these confirmations. And then we also say pay close attention to that. You'll find the details about this process on pages 6 and 7, whether it's the Indiana or the national RFP. Those pages are the same in both of them. That's where those follow-ups are. And we also strongly encourage you to please add both the clergy proposals at cts.edu and clergy renewal at cts.edu to your safe sender list, so that our emails don't hit those spam folders, aren't being filtered out by your internet service provider, so that you're getting all of the communication that we are sending. That's that. The next thing is just things we ask you to please do. So make sure you read through those the RFP that's appropriate for where you are. Make sure that you're sharing it with your team. It's downloadable from the website, so we encourage you to grab those and look through them. You'll notice this year that they look different. So again, if you've applied in previous years, based on feedback that we've gotten from congregations and pastors, we tried to group the information together in ways that made logical sense, where information that was related to other pieces of information could all be found in the same place. We've also expanded some of the guidance that we provide. So things that we would have answered in an email that people sent when we got a lot of those same emails, We tried to provide those answers on the front side now so that you're getting that information. We also added some guidance as far as how to fill out those form pages correctly and accurately, and also guidance about the documentation that we ask for so that there's no confusion with those, or at least hopefully there's less confusion. That was our heart behind that. We are, of course, always available to answer your questions. The best way to contact us is through email. It's that clergyrenewal@cts.edu email address. But you can also call, and I'll include our phone number on the next slide. Those PDF form pages, those will go up onto the website this afternoon after this webinar is over. And just make sure that you're using either Adobe to fill those in, or you're filling them in your web browser before you're saving them. Particularly those budget pages, they auto calculate. But if you save it to your computer first and then fill in the budget lines, it will not, those auto calculate parts don't work. So, so keep that in mind. Make sure you refer to the notes and checklist. That is in the back. It's either on page 22 or page 23. That gives you all of the formatting information that folks ask for. It will let you know how many pages your budget narratives should be, how many pages your proposal narratives should be, your margins, print on one side, those types of things. And then it will also include all of the parts that go into the complete proposal. And it will also include the documentation, and it shows you the correct order. So that's a great thing to use as you're finishing pieces and you're pulling it together to use that notes and checklist. This is an encouragement. If you have adjudicatory that you will need to refer to for your letter of good standing, if you're covered by a group exemption for your 501c3 standing, many of our congregations that apply receive that documentation also from their judicatory. Please give your judicatory ample time to prepare your letter of standing and provide you with the documentation that you need. And of course, we are always available at any point between now and the time that the applications are due if you have questions. And again, you can email us or you can call us. Do keep in mind that as we get closer to the application due dates, those response times are a little bit slower because, as you might imagine, we tend to get flooded. And so just please just keep that in mind. And if you leave a voicemail, please leave your question in your voicemail rather than just saying, hey, I have a question. It makes it much easier for us to provide that answer that you're looking for if you let us know what information you need. Again, that application deadline is Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. And well, there's the email address, and then the phone number, which you can find on our contact page, is 317. I'm going to forget my phone number. That's totally awesome. 931-4225. The phone number is 317-931-4225. That comes directly to my desk. And as I said, leave a detailed message, and we'll get back to you as we're able. And that's what I've got.
Thank you so much, Karen. I've been going through the questions and that a number of you have been putting in the chat, and keep those coming. I've typed out answers to some of them, but several of you have similar questions. So let me speak to those. One, a number of you are asking, does this need to be a senior pastor or a lead pastor of a congregation? And the answer is no. Any ordained pastor who is on the rolls of the congregation, as it were, is eligible to apply. So we certainly welcome applications from associate pastors, some congregations have music ministers who are ordained within that particular polity. Any pastor that the congregation identifies as an ordained pastor on its rolls is eligible to have the congregation apply on behalf of that pastor. And when we say ordination, these programs serve the whole broad range of different Christian traditions in the United States. So many polities have formal ordination. Some have another kind of term for it or another kind of arrangement. If you have any questions about that, please reach out and we will work with you to make sure that, yes, based on your tradition and how you do things, this is what you would identify as a pastoral leader. Along those same lines, let me say that we warmly welcome applications from bivocational pastors or pastors who are not serving in a full-time capacity. And the renewal grants are meant to be leaves from the congregation, but they do not necessitate that you take a leave from other employment that you might have. So in other words, please structure the leave that works for your life situation, including your employment situation. And we warmly welcome applications that take that into account. I want to say in that same connection that a number of folks, either due to bivocational situations or situations where if their loved ones, if companions travel with them, they may be looking at situations of lost income. In that case, you may designate a portion of the grant funds for as an offset for that lost income. You'll just want to take a look at, okay, realistically, how much income might be lost should you or should those engaging in these activities with you, if they're away from their job for a certain amount of time, and you may factor that in as part of the grant. Similarly, you'll want to be attentive to income tax issues. We ourselves, for a variety of reasons, are not able to give tax advice. There are just so many variables when it comes to different states, different financial situations. It would not be responsible of us to say anything definitive about potential tax implications to pastors of these grants. What we strongly encourage you to do is to consult a trusted tax professional and to receive advice from that person saying, okay, here's the structure of the grant. Do let them know that the congregation and not the individual pastor is the grantee. When grants are awarded, we make the check out to the congregation, we mail it to the congregation, and then we let the congregation and the pastor decide how to disperse those funds in order to cover the activities. But beyond that, just talk to a tax professional. Should you receive the advice that there will be a tax implication for these grants as far as the pastor's personal income taxes, then you may also designate a portion of the grant as a tax offset. That is, we don't want pastors to have to take a major financial hit themselves based on this grant opportunity. So if designating a portion of the funds would offset that, then that is permissible. If you request that, just include in your application, oh, we talked to a trusted professional, this is the advice we received, and that's why we're putting that in. I'm seeing a number of questions asking, how competitive are these programs? How many grants do you give out? On average, we give out approximately 25 grants within the Indiana program and 125 grants within the national program. Every once in a while, we have extra funding. In that case, we also give that out. So that number will occasionally go up. It will almost never be less than that, though. So at a minimum in a given year, between the two programs, we're giving out about 150 grants, approximately 25 in Indiana and 125 in the national program. The number of applications year to year varies dramatically, and that's not generally information that's that we make public. But what I will say is that the programs are competitive enough to where it is very common for congregations to apply multiple times. It is certainly no stigma. It certainly doesn't indicate that there's anything wrong necessarily with the application or the congregation if an application is turned down. It's just much more a function of the fact that we receive many more excellent applications than we're able to fund. And with that in mind, I'm seeing a number of questions about reapplication. Something to know about our procedures is that we do rotate readers regularly. So should your congregation apply, not be funded, and then apply again in a future year, it's very likely that the people reading it will be different than the people that read it the first time. And both for that reason and because at any given time, we really do want you to identify, okay, what are the best activities for getting at your renewal leave goals? You do not need to think about any sort of major rewrites in between applications. If the activities that you proposed one year are still the right ones for a future application, then go with those and know that, again, the readers will be very used to the idea of, oh yeah, this is a reapplication, and that's quite common. Trying to think if there are other things to say about reapplying, but that's another area where if you have specific questions, you're welcome to reach out to us. But do know that we are committed to walking with you from the very first time that you're considering putting an application in. And then if you put an application in, it's not funded, and you want to try again in a future year, know that we want to continue to accompany you on that aspect of the process as well. Several people were asking for clarification about the length of a renewal leave. As I said, until a few years ago, not only the gold standard, but the only standard was a minimum of 3 months away. Now, the way we ask you to think about that would be, what is a stretch goal for the pastor and the congregation? What is going to be really feasible for you? For many congregations, we believe an uninterrupted 3 months is feasible. And if you go on our website, you can hear testimony from pastors and congregations that talk about what that is like. However, again, we recognize that if that's not feasible for you, just put down, this is the amount of time that we can reasonably envision being away across the course of 24 months, and give the rationale for that, and know that the readers will take very seriously the reasons that you give as to why this is the right amount of time away given the situation. Somebody asked if there's a maximum time away. No, actually, if you whatever the congregation will support. We know we've had a number of grants that went up to 6 months away. I think some went even further. It's really a matter of, again, whatever the pastor and the congregation will agree would be the right amount of time in order to reach the goals. Somebody asked a very good question saying, hey, I'm a C.S. Lewis fan. You mentioned somebody doing a C.S. Lewis leave. Will it seem like copycat? Will it seem like I'm if I put that in? No, again, it's what will make your heart sing. And we realize there's some activities that a lot of people love. So lots of people like going to the Holy Land. Lots of people like going to Iona or walking the Camino. Lots of people like exploring emerging churches in Africa. Lots of people like motorcycling across the woods of Wisconsin. In other words, please don't worry at all about how your activities might compare to someone else's. And that goes the other way too. Don't think that there's some secret set of activities to where if you propose this thing instead of the thing that you really want to do, that somehow you'll have a better chance. I promise you that what the readers are looking for is the case that you make that these are the right activities for you. So You're welcome to consult with people that have received the grants in order to get general advice on how it goes. But please don't think that somehow a certain set of activities is more likely to be funded than some other set of activities. It really is that magical alchemy of these are the right activities for this congregation, this pastor, in the right time. And this is what will really renew them and make their hearts sing. Focus on that. And those are the applications that have the strongest chance of being funded. I'm just going through and taking a look at some other questions. When is the earliest that you can apply? The application is online now. I will say that we do tend to process them at around the same time. So if you apply early, you are certainly welcome to do that for peace of mind, and you'll get confirmation and so on. But as far as the application processing, that will be on the same timeline as those that apply closer to deadline in March 15th. I see a number of very good questions saying, hey, given that we are planning these activities so far out in advance, how do we think about budgeting for those? And the answer is, we advise that you go ahead and think through, okay, if you were to travel or do these activities tomorrow or next week, what would that cost? You know, so you can go on a travel website, talk to a travel agent, gather whatever data you can on what those costs would be. And then given that it's a year plus out, feel free to build in a little bit of cushion for inflation, for enhanced travel costs. We often advise maybe around 10%. In other words, if an activity were to cost $100 if you did it tomorrow, maybe build in about $110 budget so that accounts for inflation. When it comes to your budget narrative, we definitely do want to see that you've thought through these numbers and that the numbers that you're proposing are based on, you know, actual research that you've done. That said, we don't want a situation where you're going to not have enough money, that you're not going to ask for enough money to really do what it is you want to do. There is no advantage to an application that asks for less money as opposed to more money, if more money means that you'll be more successful in having these activities go well. In other words, an application that asks for only $23,000 as opposed to $50,000, that's not an automatic advantage. What the readers will be looking at is, okay, how well does the application make the case that, oh, $23,000, that's the right amount, as opposed to $50,000, that's the right amount. Our job, to put it bluntly, is to get this money out the door into congregations. And so do not be afraid to ask for as much money as you need in order to really do these activities and to do them well. But again, when it comes to budgeting far out in advance, do some research as to what it would cost tomorrow, then build in a little bit of a cushion to account for inflation and so on. And that said, we realize that sometimes there are significant changes that happen. I don't know if I can really think of anything that's happened in the last 2 years that would somehow really throw off travel plans. I don't know, Karen, can you think of anything? Obviously, there can be major disruptions such as global pandemics. My number one word to you about that is don't worry. Should the grant be awarded, and if a very significant disruption comes up, either globally or even just in your life, say a family issue or so on, we will work with you to figure out, okay, what is the best way forward? And the hope will always be that you keep the money and are able to do as close to the version of activities that you were going to do, taking into account the changes. And if that means an extended timeline, if that means swapping out some activities for others, we will work with you around that. So please apply in confidence that you'll want to present a fairly well thought out, relatively detailed plan. And should life happen and that plan need to be altered if the grant is awarded, then we will work with you to bring about the best possible outcome. So let me, I see a question, is this grant available for a clergy group of pastors? So again, the congregation is the entity that applies. If it's a situation where, oh, a group of pastors from different congregations might like to do this leave together, you're allowed to think in those terms. However, note that each congregation's application will be adjudicated separately. So there's no guarantee that even if one application is funded, that the other congregations will be. And we're not able to consider applications as a block. They have to be considered individually. So you're welcome to sort of envision, oh, if all of these different congregations happen to have all their applications funded, then maybe we can collaborate. But from our standpoint, every congregation's application is an entity unto itself. That raises a very common question too around what if it's a situation of, say, clergy spouses that are serving the same congregation or partners that are serving the same congregation? Should they co-apply with the same congregation? And the answer to that is that what we advise is that because in the national program, a pastor can only benefit from these leaves once in the pastor's lifetime. In Indiana, it's a little different, but a pastor can benefit multiple times, every 7 years, in fact, from one of these grants. But in the national program, the main difference is that it's only once in a lifetime. And so if it is, let's say, two pastors that are married to each other, serving the same congregation, we advise that the congregation apply and only put one pastor's name down, even if the other pastor is going to be traveling a lot as the partner, as the spouse, as it were. That way, in the future, the same congregation or a different congregation can apply on behalf of the other pastor, the pastor whose name is not on the leave. And you can, so if it's a situation of two pastors, you could potentially benefit as a couple from two clergy renewal leaves in a lifetime rather than just one. We realize there are lots of different permutations and variations of family out there, which is great. So if you have any questions about your particular situation and what the best way to frame an application would be, again, feel free to reach out to us. I'm seeing a number of very good questions. How does the application, I said that it was important to demonstrate congregational commitment to this. How does the application do that? You'll notice a number of questions on the application. One invites a member of the congregation to speak to why the congregation is excited about this. That's a very important question. And I want to emphasize, this is not a writing contest. This is not a situation where you need to think about importing, if somebody in the congregation happens to have professional grant writing experience, fine, but this is not a situation where that level of expertise is required. We want to hear your authentic voice, and we work with readers that really want to hear that authentic voice as well. So authenticity is a big part of this. Think in terms of authenticity rather than professional grant writer level acumen. Another is that there's a question right on the application that asks, tell us about the journey that the congregation went on in order to get to the point to where you're putting this application in. That too is a very crucial question. We recognize that congregations are of radically different size and radically different polities in terms of how decisions are made. So there's no one model for how a congregation needs to approach the decision making. For instance, if it's a very large congregation, we recognize that oftentimes it's smaller subcommittees within the congregation that makes a lot of decisions. That's fine, but just make sure that whatever the process is within your congregation by which you make major decisions, that process is followed. One bit of advice, do not have a congregation put an application in without having at least informed the entire congregation that the application is going in. Every once in a while, we get folks who make it clear saying, oh, it's just a small group of us within the congregation that know about this application, and we're only going to tell the whole congregation if we get it. We understand, I want to let you know, we understand that this is a major emotional investment on the part of congregations, and that when applications aren't funded, that's a disappointment across the system. However, it is not healthy if, and again, this is about 20 years of experience speaking here, it is not healthy for a congregation to only find out about this once the grant has been awarded and the message is, hey, this is happening, rather than, hey, we would like to explore this together. Again, we recognize that the latter, the exploring it together, is a more vulnerable stance. However, it is the few times we have become aware of situations where the congregation was not informed, was not on board. Quite frankly, that can be quite damaging to the congregation and to the relationship between the congregation and the pastor. So we heavily advise against that. And I can say that if a reader suspects that that's the situation with an application, it's almost impossible that that application would be funded. Let's see. If you're reapplying, do you need to get updated letters from your denomination? Yes, because one of the things that letter certifies is that you remain, for those that are tied to a denomination, that you remain a pastor in good standing. If you are in a congregation that does not have any sort of denominational affiliation, you'll note that we asked for a letter from the congregation certifying that the pastor who is benefiting from this is recognized as an ordained pastor within the system. I see an excellent question about a situation where one pastor is serving multiple congregations, and the question correctly identifies that it would be one of the congregations that is applying. As far as how that works, we encourage you to just work with both congregations on the understanding that if the pastor is taking a leave, that both congregations would be supportive of that. And the money, the up to $15,000 can be utilized by both congregations in that case to provide for clergy needs and so on. However, just one congregation will be the actual entity that receives the money. So the process would be work with both congregations to make sure that the activities make sense. Both congregations can receive money from the grant in order to have their needs met during the leave, but only one congregation will be the actual applying entity. Several people are asking if we give individual feedback on turned down grants. Due to the volume of them, we're just not able to do that well. We decided a long time ago that it's a matter of equity, that if we don't have the resources to do it for everyone, that it's just not ethical to do it for some and not others. And so for that reason, we no longer give direct feedback on turned down applications. However, if you are applying and if you have sort of a specific question saying, hey, we're thinking about putting this in there, is that any red flags with that? Is that feasible? Have you seen that before? That is a question that we are willing to answer in advance. So talk to us as much as you like in advance, and we'll give you the best feedback that we can. Even though we're not able, because of equity, to give feedback to turn down applications themselves. I'm seeing a number of questions related to what about ordained pastors who are serving in non-congregational ministries, chaplaincy, denominational work, and so on. Again, because in these particular programs, it is the congregation that applies and the congregation that receives it. It needs to be a situation where the pastor is a pastor of a congregation. Now, if it's a situation where the pastor is on the rolls of the congregation and may also have other kinds of ministry roles within the church, that's fine, as long as the congregation can can assure us in the application, yes, this is a pastor who has pastoral duties within the congregation. I see a good question saying, what if there's a good application, but it asks for a certain amount of money? Will the readers lower that amount of money and say, no, you're only going to do half of this and not the whole thing? The answer is no. The readers will render a judgment on the proposal as it is given to us. And so the proposal will either be entirely funded as stated, or it will be declined. We will not go in and sort of do surgery on a proposal and say, okay, we're funding this part of it, but not this other part. So, so the good news is whatever you propose, if it's funded, that is what's being funded. Trying to, when are the grants awarded? So the timeline, let me fill that out. The applications are due in March. That due date, by the way, if you've been following the programs for a while, that due date shifts because the date of Easter shifts, and we would rather pastors not have to worry about submitting this, 2 hours before the Easter sermon. So, but the applications are always due in the spring, in this case, March 15th. The adjudication happens then throughout the summer, and generally by the end of August, everybody receives notification as to whether their congregation's application is being funded or not. After the paperwork is filled out, then generally checks are mailed in late fall, around October or so on. And then, as I mentioned before, renewal leave activities can start anytime January 1st of that next year. So spring application, summer decision, fall you receive the money. As of January 1, that is when renewal activities can start. Let's see. I'm receiving a number of excellent questions around how long does a pastor need to have been serving in ministry? When is a pastor eligible? Or how far away from retirement does a pastor need to be in order to receive one of these grants? The answer to that question is that we do not operate with any minimums or maximums in that regard. We realize that some denominations, some congregations have policies for this sort of thing, and those policies may specify, oh, the pastor needs to be in a congregation for X number of years before before being eligible for a sabbatical or renewal leave. But we don't operate with any such guidelines. What we look for are applications that make the case that this is the right time in the life of the pastor and in the congregation to do this. And we recognize that a number of different Christian traditions may have very different standards as far as pastoral tenures. For instance, our Methodist sisters and brothers have high mobility. Other denominations have high mobility. So pastoral tenure might be shorter compared to pastors in other branches of the tradition. And so that makes it all the more important that we be flexible on our end. We'll give grants relatively early in a pastor's total ministry if the application makes the case that this is the right time to kind of make that investment in the pastor's focus. Many of our grants take place, many of these leaves take place somewhere around the middle, midway through ministry. And then we do give grants into situations where it's clear that the pastor might be retiring 3, 4, 5 years out, but really wants the energy to finish strong. And it's a congregational situation where they really want to honor the pastor's many years in ministry. Any or all of those situations are fine with us. So again, think in terms of, is it the right time for the pastor and the congregation to do this? And don't worry about us having internal calculations as to what that needs to look like. I see a question, if that relates to, I see a question about what if the congregation has an official policy around leave or so on. Should we mention that in the application? You're welcome to do that. My only comment about that would be there too, the same question, is this the right time for the pastor in the congregation to do this, will apply. In other words, from a reader standpoint, just because it's stated in a pastor's contract, oh, okay, every 7 years this happens, let's say, and it's like, okay, it's year 6, time to do this. That is excellent, and we celebrate that. We're still going to ask the question, okay, does the application make the case that this is the right time for the pastor in the congregation? So that will be the lens that we bring to it. Let's see. What kind of reporting process is expected after the renewal leave? I already said you don't have to walk down from the mountain holding a holding a book that you've written, and we don't want to make you have to write a book afterwards. The final reporting, we think, is it's important, but it's relatively modest. It's one set of questions for the congregation, basically asking, how did it go? Anything you would have changed, anything you would like us to know, and then another set of questions. I think it's really just 5 or 6 short essay questions for the pastor, asking the same thing: how did it go? What did you learn? Anything you would change? I mentioned before, but let me amplify. When it comes to the money, we send the check to the congregation. We trust the congregation to disperse those funds in whatever way the congregation sees appropriate. And, we know congregations have lots of different ways for handling money, and we don't want to micromanage on that front. So you would disperse the money. The congregation would be responsible for tracking that. In other words, we don't collect receipts. We don't do that kind of thing. All we would need as far as finances would be a final financial statement saying, this was the budget for the grant, here's what we spent. If there's any money left over, you would return that to us for us to give out to a future pastor. And then all of that is signed by the relevant representatives from the congregation, the treasurer or congregational officers, just to certify that the money has been dealt with integrity from the congregation standpoint. And that's all that we require on the back end. So again, we don't collect the receipts. We don't do the financial audits. We trust the congregation, if the grant is awarded, to follow those procedures through the best they can. Can the congregation submit a year early? So could you apply in 2023 for 2025? No. We try to keep that, the tracking on that would be given the scale, would not be feasible. So you'll need, even though if you're awarded a grant, if a situation arises to where you would need to delay, as I said, that is possible if you negotiate with us. We would not encourage you to apply knowing that you really can't leave for 2 more years. That application likely would not be funded. Let's see. Looking through. Here's a good question. Would the grant cover things like kennel fees for boarding my dog or paying someone to look after the house while I'm gone? Yes. The way to think about this money is whatever you need in your own particular beautiful life that will allow you to pursue this opportunity. Think about the money as facilitating that. So pet sitting, house sitting. We have had folks that were traveling with a number of small children, and it was very helpful for them to bring help along to help with the children. That is certainly permissible. Whatever you need this money to do in order to have this opportunity be possible, that's the way to think about it. And if you're concerned about a specific expense, if you're wondering if that will look too odd, that's the kind of thing that you can contact us and just raise the question, hey, does this sound kosher, or would this be a red flag? Let's see. And yes, someone is clarifying. So when we say a series of shorter leaves across 24 months, in the case of the cycle that is upcoming, that is starting January 1st, 2024, and then going through December 2025. That is correct. Let's see. If it is a situation, I'm just looking through the questions. If it's a situation where the diocese assesses a certain amount of money from any money that comes into the congregation, yes, you can treat that almost akin to a tax liability, this time on the part of the congregation. You'll just want to make it clear in your application that that is the case, and to provide support for that, so that when the readers are looking at that and saying, oh, this application is asking for a certain amount of money to offset denominational assessments on congregational income, you would provide that information the same way you would provide information in terms of personal tax liability. I'm seeing a question about if the pastor is going on leave, but a number of staff members may be taking on additional duties while the pastor is away, is it appropriate to compensate them with the grant funds? And the answer is yes. It's very common for congregations to identify, okay, because of the pastor being gone, there may be these additional duties onboarded by existing staff. It's certainly something the readers would understand, that they might want to compensate them. As far as compensating members who might be working on the grant and so on, that is permissible. Our frame is that we would hope that the congregation would be excited about this, and that there would be support across the congregation. That said, if it's the case where members of the congregation might be doing significant extra work in order to make this happen, and the congregation would like to compensate those folks somehow, that is permissible. Yes, caregiver for family elders, all of that is permissible under the auspices of whatever is needed in order to make this work. Here's a good question. If you have talked to us about a potential red flag, and if I've said when you call, or if Karen has said, oh yeah, that's fine, you are welcome to say in the application, hey, we called the clergy renewal staff, we called Dr. Saylor, we talked to Karen, and they said this was okay. You're welcome to put that in there. Just if you want to just make sure that readers know that you've done the due diligence on that. Here's an excellent question asking about, is it an expectation that the congregation will continue to pay the pastor's salary and benefits during the leave? The answer is an emphatic yes, and that is spelled out in the RFP. This grant should not be understood as a way of the congregation paying the pastor's normal salary, benefits, and so on. Now, again, we don't dictate that it be a full-time pastor as opposed to part-time or any other arrangement, but whatever the standard salary and compensation arrangement is for the pastor in the congregation, that needs to be continued during the leave process. And the grant money is for the purposes of the extra activities in connection with the renewal leave, and any proposal to where it seems like that's not going to be the case will not be funded. I'm seeing some questions. You'll notice in the RFP that we ask that the pastor and the congregation certify their intent for the pastor to remain in the congregation for at least a year following return from the leave. That's there because, again, the philosophy of the program really is that This is first and foremost a matter of strengthening the pastor and the congregation for shared ministry together into the future. That said, I think it says in a book somewhere, the Holy Spirit blows where it will. we know God's call can take twists and turns, and if it's a situation, again, particularly for our sisters and brothers who are in high mobility, high itinerancy kinds of situations, we recognize that it's not always within the pastor's control, within the congregation's control as to what new opportunities might emerge. So by applying, you are certifying your intent to have this relationship continue for at least a year. That said, if contingencies arise and that needs to be revisited, that's the sort of thing that we're happy to talk about, and that shouldn't be thought of as in a legalistic way, but more in terms of the spirit of shared ministry together. I'm seeing a number of questions around what about ordained deacons? What about this kinds of status? The best advice I could give is to call us, because we are aware, again, that different Christian traditions use different kinds of terminology, have different kinds of requirements. If you call us and say, oh, this person has this title and this status with this kind of education, and so on, then we will work individually with you to determine either, yes, this is an equivalency, or no, it is not. But there are enough variables there that that's one where we would really invite you to call us, and we'll work with you to determine that. I want to say that one of the things that we look for, and this pertains to a number of questions I'm seeing, one of the things we look for is a sense of joy in the activities as opposed to obligation. So, for instance, we regularly receive applications where a pastor will say, oh, I really want to research this thing which is relevant to the life of my congregation or relevant to my own ministry, and maybe do some writing about it. In situations like that, what the readers will look for is this pastor proposing this because the pastor really loves history, really loves doing this kind of research, and there's nothing this will make this pastor's heart sing to be buried. I'm a historian and a theologian, so I can relate to this. I can relate to the nerdy, oh, there's nothing I would rather do than be buried in an archive somewhere discovering lots of cool stuff. If that's the case, tell us that. Tell us why that makes your heart sing. However, if it's a situation where the pastor says, well, that's not really what would make my heart sing, but I feel like in order to justify this time away, I've got to come back with something really useful, that's less good. That's moves from joy to obligation. So, and my point in bringing that up is to say the exact same activity can either be really helpful or not helpful, depending on whether it falls on the joy side of the equation or the obligation side of the equation. And the same with if you want to go around and listen to lots of preachers to get new ideas for your preaching. If that's a joyful thing for you, we see a number of applications that say, look, as someone who preaches just about every week, I don't really get to hear a lot of good preaching myself, people preaching to me. That would be a joyful thing. That sort of thing is fine. If it's, oh, I feel like my preaching is flagging, I guess I sort of need to go around, and in other words, it's basically going to feel like going to work every Sunday. You're going and trying to and you're just thinking about your own preaching, and it feels like punching the clock and showing up for duty. That's less good. So again, the exact same activity, depending on whether it falls on the joy side of the equation or the obligation side of the equation, can either be something that the readers would enthusiastically approve or something that they would really have hesitations about. So again, the goal in the application, what you want to think about in the application, is really making the case, why do these activities fall on the joy side of the equation? And if they do, it's fine if the activities that are joyful to you look like work to someone else, and vice versa. This is your application. This is your heart that's singing. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. I'll see if I can maybe bundle this together. when will this recording be made available? I think within the next week or so. You can look on our application, and again, I'll look on our website, and this recording will be there. And again, hopefully a few weeks after that, we will have a Spanish language overdub for this. Let's see. Yeah, I'm seeing a number of questions about what I just talked about, this joy versus obligation. Can the joy benefit the congregation? Similar kind of thing. In other words, I remember an application where the pastor was talking about how the congregation was in a food desert in the inner city. And a lot of the pastor's leave was going to be going around and looking at congregations that were addressing food deserts sort of across the country. Obviously, this was something very relevant to the pastor, very relevant to the congregation. What I remember about the application is that the application made a very compelling, authentic case saying, oh, this is something that was close to the pastor's heart. This was a justice issue that was close to the pastor's heart. So even though it was directly benefiting the congregation and sort of directly pertaining to the ministry, it was clear that this time would be renewing and revitalizing for the pastor. I can envision another application where if it sounded like the pastor was basically just going to be working and laboring just in different parts of the country and not really on any sort of leave, not really in any sort of heart situation, that would be less compelling to readers. So it can definitely benefit the congregation as long as it falls on the joy side of the register. One thing, if you've applied before, you'll notice that we've reworded a couple of the questions, hopefully to make them simpler. The substance hasn't really changed, but we realized that some of the language was a little confusing. So hopefully they're simpler. We have added a brand new question, which is we realized that some congregations, the best way to really get across the spirit of what they want to do is not just through the written word, but through video. You have the option now of including in your application a URL, a link to a video. We're not able to, please don't transfer the videos to us. We're not able to, wherever the video is, it has to be hosted somewhere else. And the readers will only watch a portion of the video. So don't send an hour and expect the readers to watch a full hour. Specify the several minute chunk that you want the readers to focus on. But that's our way of giving you more options of conveying kind of the spirit of what you want to do, since we realize some people, they're the spirit of what they want to do really comes out through art or through video instead of just the written word. So take a look at that question on the application. That is optional. You're not required to include video, but if that is helpful to you, that option is there. All right. Let's see. I see a really excellent question. All of the documents that you submit to us, we keep confidential. We will never publicize an application. And I realize a number of you, several people have asked, can I see a sample application? The answer to that is no. A, because these documents are kind of, they're kind of personal. We want to respect the confidentiality of them. And two, again, we really want you to dream what's going to be right for yourself. We don't want to inadvertently set up a situation where applications are kind of copying each other. But both in terms of the application that you submit and then the final reports, those are confidential documents. If you notice on our website quotes from pastors or so on, please know that those are situations where we approach the pastor on the basis of something that they said and said, hey, would you like to write something for us? Or do you give us permission to use these few sentences from what you wrote because we think they're really powerful? But we will not quote any aspect of your application or your final report without your permission, nor will we share them. One last question is, you'll see on the application that these grants are not primarily for the purpose of pursuing an advanced degree, like a Doctor of Ministry degree or a PhD or something like that. Now, but chances are, if you're doing an advanced degree, that means you have some kind of passion, some kind of research interest that really informs your ministry. So you're welcome to say, oh, I'm there was a pastor I remember who was doing a Doctor of Ministry related to stand-up comedy and what pastors could basically learn from stand-up comedians. And so their leave involved, both, I think, taking classes and traveling to see a number of stand-up comedians. However, and that was fine. What would not have been fine if they were asking for grant money to actually pay the university fees, actually pay for the doctoral program itself. There are other funding opportunities out there for that. We really want you to focus in on the activities that are life-giving and renewing. I'm aware that we didn't get to every single question. The good news, again, is that this is really just meant to be kind of a sample of, and any questions you have, I know we've said this several times, but I really want to end by underlining this. We realize this is a this is a vulnerable and emotional and heart-driven opportunity for pastors and congregations. What we want to do and what we are committed to doing is accompanying you on, again, every aspect of that journey. So if in doubt, please do reach out. You can share ideas, you can ask questions, and just know that we're here. And I just want to end again with a note of gratitude, not only for you joining us this afternoon, but thank you for all the work you do on behalf of God's realm and this world that God's love. Thank you so much, and blessings.